Sarah Miller drove her Honda CR-V down Wisteria Lane with a sense of relief that felt physical. She was a 29-year-old travel nurse, and she had just finished a grueling 13-week contract in a trauma center in Chicago. She was tired. She smelled like hospital sanitizer and stale coffee. All she wanted was to unlock the front door of her parents' house, take a hot bath, and sleep for 3 days. The house, a charming 2-story colonial in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, had been empty for 6 months since her father passed away. Sarah had been debating selling it, but she wasn't ready to let go. It was her sanctuary. She pulled into the driveway, her brow furrowed. There was a car in the driveway. A rusted, beat-up 2005 Ford Taurus with a cracked windshield. Maybe the landscaper, she thought. No, I cancelled the service. She grabbed her bag and walked to the front door. She inserted her key. It didn't turn. She jiggled it. Nothing. She tried again. The key wouldn't even go all the way in. The lock had been changed. Confused, Sarah rang the doorbell. She heard footsteps inside. Her house, her floorboards creaking. The door opened. A woman stood there. She was maybe 40, wearing a stained pink bathrobe and holding a cigarette. Smoke wafted out into the humid Georgia air. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, looking annoyed. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "What are you doing in my house?" The woman took a drag of the cigarette. "I live here. Who are you?" "I own this house," Sarah shouted, dropping her bag. "I'm Sarah Miller. My father built this house. Get out!" A man appeared behind the woman. He was shirtless, covered in tattoos, drinking a Monster energy drink. This was Mitch. The woman was Candy. "Honey, get the lease," Mitch said calmly. "Lease?" Sarah screamed. "I never rented this house." "We rented it from the landlord," Mitch said, leaning against the door frame with a smirk. "We paid cash, first and last month. Now get off our porch before I call the cops for harassment." They slammed the door in her face. Sarah heard the deadbolt slide shut. Sarah called 911. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped her phone twice. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived 20 minutes later. Sarah was pacing on the sidewalk, crying. "They are inside," Sarah told the officers. "They broke in. They changed the locks." Officer Daniels, a tired-looking man, nodded. "All right, let's talk to them." He knocked on the door. Mitch opened it. He was wearing a shirt now, and he had a folder in his hand. "Good afternoon, officer," Mitch said politely. "Is there a problem? This lady is harassing us." "She says she owns the house," Officer Daniels said. "And we rent it," Mitch said. He handed the officer a piece of paper. It was a lease, a standard Georgia residential lease agreement downloaded from the internet. It had Mitch's name, Candy's name, and a scribbled signature at the bottom that looked nothing like Sarah's. "This is fake," Sarah yelled. "I didn't sign that. That's not my signature." Mitch shrugged. "We met the landlord on Craigslist, guy named Steve. We paid him $3,000 cash. Here's the receipt." He showed a generic receipt from a booklet you can buy at Walmart. Officer Daniels looked at the lease. He looked at Sarah. Then he said the 4 words that every homeowner in America fears. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" "They have a lease," the officer said. "I can't prove it's fake right here on the sidewalk. I can't determine who the real landlord is. I'm not a judge. If you want them out, you have to go to court and evict them." "Evict them?" Sarah shrieked. "They are intruders. They are criminals." "If I kick them out," the officer explained patiently, "and it turns out this lease is real, I get sued for illegal eviction. They have established residency. See their mail? Mitch pointed to an Amazon package on the porch with his name on it. They get mail here, the officer said. They are tenants. You cannot shut off the power. You cannot change the locks. You cannot enter the property without 24 hours notice. If you try to force them out, I will have to arrest you. The officers got back in their car and left. Mitch winked at Sarah. See you in court, landlady. He slammed the door. Sarah slept in a Motel 6 that night. The next morning, she went to a lawyer. Mr. Henderson was an eviction specialist. He looked at Sarah with pity. This is a classic scam, Henderson said. They are professional squatters. They look for empty homes, usually belonging to deceased people or traveling workers. They break in, change the locks, and print a fake lease. They know the police won't touch it. So get them out, Sarah said. I can file the eviction today, Henderson said. But Georgia courts are backed up. It will take maybe 4 months, maybe 6. 6 months? Sarah gasped. Where am I supposed to live? And what about my house? My dad's furniture is in there. I'm sorry, Sarah, but you have to be careful. Do not turn off the water. Do not intimidate them. If you do, they can sue you for constructive eviction and stay even longer. For the next 3 weeks, Sarah lived in her car and at friends' houses. She parked down the street from her own house and watched. It was torture. She watched Mitch wearing her father's favorite flannel shirt. She watched Candy selling her mother's antique lamps at a yard sale on the front lawn. Sarah called the cops. They said it was a dispute over property ownership and did nothing. She saw them smoking inside the house. She saw strange people coming and going at 3 a.m. The lawn, which her father had manicured for 30 years, was overgrown. There were trash bags piled on the porch. One night, Sarah received a notification on her phone from the Ring doorbell, which they hadn't disconnected yet. It was a video of Mitch. He was looking right into the camera. Hey, Sarah, Mitch said, grinning. We know you're watching. Listen, if you want us to leave, we can work something out. Cash for keys. You give us $10,000 and we move out on Saturday. Otherwise, I think I'm gonna start painting the walls black. I hear black mold is hard to get rid of. Sarah threw her phone across the motel room. They were holding her house hostage. She couldn't pay $10,000. She was broke from the hotel bills and legal fees. And even if she paid, would they actually leave? She felt helpless. The law protected the criminals. She needed a loophole. Sarah was at a diner, crying into a coffee, when she overheard a conversation in the booth behind her. 2 men were talking about a problem tenant. So I called the cleaner, one man said. Best money I ever spent. Sarah turned around. Who is the cleaner? The man looked at her. He saw the desperation in her eyes. He scribbled a number on a napkin. His name is Frank. He doesn't break the law, but he stretches it. Sarah called the number. A deep voice answered. This is Frank. I have squatters, Sarah said. Police won't help. Do you own the house? Frank asked. Yes. Is the lease they have fake? Yes. Okay. Meet me at the Home Depot on State Street in an hour. Frank was not what Sarah expected. He wasn't a thug. He was a 50-year-old man who looked like a high school football coach. He wore a polo shirt and khakis. He had a calm, terrifyingly polite demeanor. Here is the law, Frank said, leaning on his truck. You cannot kick them out. That is illegal eviction. However, he pulled out a document. As the homeowner, you have the right to sign a lease with anyone you want. Sarah frowned. But they are already there. Exactly, Frank smiled. They have a lease, allegedly. But I can have a lease too. A legal, notarized lease signed by you, the owner. That makes me a legal tenant, which means I have the right to enter the property, live in the property, and enjoy the amenities. You want to live with them? I don't want to live with them, Frank said. I want to make them want to leave. It's called squatting on the squatters. Is it dangerous? For me? No. I'm 6'4" and 250 pounds. I'm a retired Marine. I know de-escalation. And I know how to be the most annoying roommate in history. Sarah signed the lease. She rented Room B to Frank Castle, not his real name but close enough, for $1 a month. Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Mitch and Candy were sleeping in. They had been partying until 4 a.m. Suddenly, the front door opened. Mitch jumped out of bed, Sarah's parents' bed. He ran into the hallway in his boxers. "Hey, who the hell are you?" Mitch screamed. Frank was standing in the hallway. He was wearing a tight black t-shirt that showed off arms the size of tree trunks. He was carrying a sleeping bag and a massive boombox. "Morning, neighbor," Frank said cheerfully. "I'm the new tenant. Just signed a lease with Sarah, moving into the guest room." "You can't be here," Mitch yelled. "We have a lease." "So do I." Frank held up his notarized document. "And since your lease, which is fake by the way, doesn't specify exclusive use of the property, and this is a multi-bedroom home, here we are, roommates." Mitch tried to puff up his chest. "Get out, or I'll make you get out." Frank stepped closer. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked down at Mitch with eyes that had seen combat zones. "I wouldn't do that, Mitch. That would be assault. And I would have to defend myself. And you don't want me to defend myself." Mitch backed down. He ran to call the police. Officer Daniels arrived again. He looked exhausted. "He broke in," Mitch yelled, pointing at Frank. "Arrest him!" Frank handed his lease to Officer Daniels. "I'm a legal tenant, officer. Here is my lease, signed yesterday. Here is my key." Officer Daniels looked at the paper. He looked at Mitch. A tiny, almost invisible smile appeared on the officer's face. "Well," Officer Daniels said to Mitch, "he has a lease. You have a lease. This looks like a civil matter. You guys will have to work it out." Mitch's jaw dropped. "You're kidding me. You're letting him stay?" "He lives here," the officer shrugged. "Have a nice day." As the police car drove away, Frank turned to Mitch and Candy. "I hope you guys like polka music. I play the accordion." Usually practicing starts at 5 a.m. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in legal harassment. Frank didn't touch Mitch or Candy. He didn't threaten them. He simply existed. Aggressively. Day 1. Frank set up a lawn chair in the living room, directly in front of the TV Mitch was watching. Frank watched C-SPAN, political news, at maximum volume. When Mitch tried to change the channel, Frank said, "I pay rent. I get 50% of the remote." Frank cooked dinner. He boiled cabbage and vinegar. The smell was horrific. It permeated every inch of the house. He ate it with his mouth open, staring directly at Candy. Day 2. Mitch and Candy tried to lock themselves in the master bedroom. Frank removed the door. "Maintenance," Frank said, holding a screwdriver. Sarah authorized a repair on the hinges. Safety inspection. "Put the door back!" Candy screamed. "Parts are on back order," Frank said. "Should be here in 6 to 8 weeks. Day 3. Frank invited his book club over. The book club consisted of 4 biker friends. They didn't do anything illegal. They just sat in the living room, cleaning their motorcycle's parts on the coffee table, eating Mitch's food and staring at him in silence. Mitch tried to intimidate them. "This is my house." One of the bikers, a man named Tiny, burped loudly. Our roommate Frank invited us. Check the lease, bro. Guests allowed. By the fourth night, Mitch and Candy were cracking. They couldn't sleep because Frank was doing yoga in the hallway at 2 a.m., which involved loud grunting. They couldn't eat because Frank had legally thrown away all expired food in the fridge, which was everything they bought. Mitch called Sarah. "Call him off," Mitch screamed into the phone. "He's crazy." "I can't," Sarah said, sitting comfortably in her friend's apartment drinking wine. "He has a lease, Mitch. It's a civil matter. I can't evict him. He has rights." "We'll leave," Mitch yelled. "Just get him out of here." "Okay," Sarah said. "Leave the keys on the counter. Vacate the property fully. Once you are gone, I'll tell Frank his lease is terminated." We're going. Sarah watched from her car down the street. She saw Mitch and Candy dragging trash bags out of the house. They looked exhausted, terrified, and defeated. They threw their stuff into the rusted Ford Taurus. Frank stood on the porch waving. "Don't forget to write," Frank shouted cheerfully. As the Taurus peeled out of the driveway, Frank walked to the curb. He pulled out his phone and called Sarah. "The eagle has landed. The nest is empty." Sarah walked into her house an hour later. It was a disaster. The smell of stale smoke and Frank's boiled cabbage hung in the air. There were cigarette burns on the carpet. The walls were scuffed. Her mother's antique mirror was missing. But it was empty. It was hers again. She walked to the kitchen. Frank was scrubbing the counter. "They took the TV," Frank said, "and the microwave. Sorry about that." "I don't care," Sarah said. She felt tears running down her face. "They're gone." She took out her checkbook. "How much do I owe you, Frank?" "Standard fee," Frank said. $2,000. Cheaper than a lawyer, faster than a judge. She wrote the check. She hugged him. It was an awkward hug, hugging a 250-pound stranger in her kitchen, but she squeezed him tight. "Thank you. You saved my life." "Change the locks," Frank said, packing up his boombox. "Install a security system and never, ever leave your house empty without a house sitter again." 2 months later, the house was painted. The floors were refinished. Sarah had sold the house. She couldn't live there anymore. The memory of the violation was too strong. But she sold it to a nice young family, and with the money, she bought a small cabin in the mountains. She received a letter in the mail one day. It was from the court. Mitch and Candy had been arrested 3 towns over. They tried the same scam on another house, but this time they picked the wrong house. They broke into the home of a deputy sheriff. They were currently in jail for burglary and fraud. Sarah smiled. She threw the letter in the fireplace and watched it burn. She poured herself a cup of coffee and walked out onto her new porch. The air was clean. The woods were quiet, and she had the only key.